My guest is Eddie Thomason. Eddie is an author, a keynote speaker, an educator. You definitely have to make sure you go to his website, which is eddiethomason.com. I'm not going to give you all the backstory because I have him on here so that you can hear from him. So if you can, please just take a moment and introduce yourself to everybody listening.
Absolutely. So my name is Eddie Thomason. Like Mike was just saying, what I'm primarily focusing on right now, I am a keynote speaker, like he's been mentioning. I'm launching my own podcast, so it's going to be something else that's going to be there for you guys to plug into. And then the last thing is just a coach, right? So just being able to be here and help people, but it's a little bit of a different spin. So instead of just being an executive coach and trying to get high performance out of different areas, my goal is to help the entrepreneur, the business owner, facilitate mentorship type of relationships within their organization so they can stop having so much turnover from all the millennials that are coming through, because obviously the average millennial leaves after 3 years. So my mindset is kind of helping people build that foundation to where those millennials want to stay because they want that personal growth, that association, so that they know they're cared about. So
that's interesting. So like I've hear about that oftentimes, and they talk about it in the workplace where there's a whole different mindset between the people who are senior in the company and the people who are millennial. In the millennial generation, like you maybe come in knowing that you're going to be at that place 1 to 3 years, where previously we were kind of came in like, oh, I'm looking for a lifetime partner.
Exactly.
Yep. So that's interesting. How did you get pegged to do that?
So primarily it was because of my speaking, right? So my speaking business is actually geared towards youth and young adults. So I love that, like my message just resonates with them. I love being able to interact with them. I'm not so far removed from being a young adult myself. I'm only 27, right? So it's not that I'm so far gone, but I'm in this weird spot because I also got 2 kids. So I kind of connect a little bit more with the older crowd. And I've always been an old soul too, right? So I can kind of connect with, just from the way my mom raised me and everything else, I get the mindset, the work ethic that goes into that older generation. But obviously they had questions, right? Like what do we do? How do we retain our young people? Because if we just rely on our older, more veteran personnel, then eventually they aren't going to be here to work, right? So how does that continuously go on? And I actually had a guy on my PR team basically reach out to me and was like, hey, have you ever thought about this angle? Like combining the angle that you have with youth today and connecting that to the business professionals, the world that you're in all day, every day. And I was like, no, I haven't, but that sounds like a phenomenal opportunity. Let's go ahead and put it together. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been dope.
That's pretty cool that you found an opportunity like that. And I didn't know that you were 27. For some reason, I thought we were closer in age. But your old soul resonates.
Right. That's what I said, bro. It's just a part of what it is, right? Everybody always assumes that I'm 35 or older. I'm like, nah, man, I'm still under 30.
That's pretty cool. You're in a good position to like have the mindset that you have and to be working with the youth, and to have such a background. Like I was reading your bio and just kind of reading about, all the things that you do. And I'm just like, man, like it looks like you've been doing this for a long time. How long has it been?
That's a funny story. So I went to school for entrepreneurship, and I worked for entrepreneurs since I was 9 years old. So that mindset of working for myself has always been there. I don't think it's ever been something that wasn't present, because I always knew from a young age, I was like, bro, at some point I'm gonna have something of my own. I'm gonna work for myself, right? As far as my speaking business itself, it officially launched, to be honest with you, in November of last year. So November of 2019. However, I've been speaking since 2013. I never like basically took the training wheels off and was like, I'm gonna dive into this, actually be proactive in outreach and things like that. At first, I was just kind of taking things as they came to me. But I was like, no, man, I got to do what I feel as though is passionate. I feel as though I'm serving so many other people. And that's my entire mindset is servant leadership, right? So how can I use my story to serve others? And that's where the entire thought came from.
That's awesome. And, and that's exactly why we're here. That's why I started this podcast, because when I started my entrepreneurial journey, like I didn't have anybody close to me who was guiding me. I didn't have anyone that I had as a mentor through the process. And I ended up having to create that mentorship relationship, like in my imagination in a way.
Yeah.
By reading other people's story and listening to other people's story. I read the book Think and Grow Rich, and they talked about how you have to form this, this mastermind.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was just like, wow, okay, I can do that. So to to know that how important that is, I think is key. And I want to use this platform for that very reason for other people who may be in the same boat as you and I.
Right.
And you and I talked and found some similarities in kind of like how we began and where we started. We'll get to that. But I just think it's important that we have these type of platforms where people can hear how people got started and hear what kind of struggles and challenges they had, and also how they overcame them. So just speaking about story, like let's just talk a little bit about and tell me how you got to this point. Like what brought you here to do what you
Yeah,
do?
absolutely. So before we get into that, because you made a really good point when you talked
Okay.
about mentorship and just developing your mastermind, right? I think a lot of the times, I don't know about you, but before probably 3 or 4 years ago, I thought mentorship was just learning from somebody who was older than me, right? Like you're automatically a mentor, you're older than me, you're teaching me some things, right? Which I realized, flash flash forward to today, that's not mentorship, right? Mentorship comes from somebody who's in a standpoint of life of where you want to be, and then they're teaching you how to do it, right? And you don't necessarily need that to be a physical person, like you just mentioned. It can be through reading books, right? John Maxwell, I consider him a mentor of mine, although I never met the man in person. I feel as though a lot of his books, a lot of his audios, things that he's been able to give me, I get a lot from that. So mentorship is a huge thing. I just wanted to touch on that. But the journey, man, the journey is the fun stuff, right?
That's the stuff right there.
I call it origin stories. I always refer to them as origin stories because I'm a hero fan, right? I'm a Marvel fan, so everybody's got their hero origin story and everything else. And just to give you, I guess, a peek all the way back, I was born and raised down in Baltimore, Maryland, and into a family that basically struggled with poverty for generations, right? I had a dad who walked out on me and my mom and my brother when I was only about, I think it was between 7 and 8 years old. And it forced my mom to take care of me and my brother on a $13,000 a year disability income, right? So when I say we were poor, right? I
Right.
actually, I actually had a job. So going back to what I mentioned before, I had a job since I was 9 years old, working for an entrepreneur down at the Orioles and Ravens Stadium, selling hats and T-shirts and peanuts, outside the stadium as fans and everybody else was going inside the stadium. And I think that was when I first, like I said, got exposed to that idea of entrepreneurship. And I'm skipping around in the story a little bit, but I know when I was, like I said, I was 9 years old when that happened. When I turned about 13 or 14 years old, I told my boss at the time, who became like a father figure to me, to be honest with you. I told him, I was like, "Hey, Damon, I'm gonna go get a regular job because I just want to, I want to see what it's like to have a regular job." And I wound up having a job at Finish Line for all of about, I think, 2 or 3 months. And I was like, "This is horrible." I worked 8 hours and I got paid like $200 compared to I worked with Damon for one weekend and I can get paid $400. So this is this is ridiculous, right? But yeah, so flash forward, sports was huge to me, right? My brother was a big proponent in helping me get into sports. And Elwood, if you're watching this right now, bro, I love you. I appreciate you. But he was a huge person and just encouraging me to play sports because he was a sports nut, right? It was right around the time when the Ravens won the Super Bowl. He started transitioning. I was like, "Man, I love football. I want to get into football." And I started, looking up the guys like Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, and all those guys that was down in Baltimore. And my brother was just like, "Nah, man, I'm gonna groom you. You're gonna be a football player. We're gonna get you set, get you straight." And I never played organized ball until I was a freshman in high school. And when I got there as a freshman, I played a really good year at JV. I was able to play varsity my sophomore year, and I earned a scholarship my junior year of playing football. But the significant point in that is that my goal with growing up, right? I think we mentioned this or we talked about this beforehand, but my entire mindset was very similar to a lot of other guys that sit in poverty today, right? They think they only got three choices in order to be successful. Either you're going to be a professional athlete, you're going to be an entertainer, right? So a rapper or singer or something from that perspective, or you're going to be a drug dealer, right? That's pretty much like mentally in my mind, that's what I thought. That was my only options. So I chose option one. I was going to go to the league. I was going to be an athlete, right? And, obviously you get hit with so many other things when you make that decision. I remember going around telling coaches and counselors and teachers, "No, I'm going to the league. I'm going to the league." And then you get hit with so much pushback, right? I had teachers tell me that it's never been done before. From that school that I was going to, I actually had some teachers that told me, I basically had more likely to end up in jail or dead before I ever had that chance to make that happen, right? Which honestly wasn't that much, it wasn't that far off. Like statistically speaking, that is very true, right?
It's
but
just
obviously, you know,
an adult saying that to
exactly. That's that's the wild thing, right? But here's what it did for me though. It made me have that resolve, right? Like I don't know about you, but I'm that guy. If you tell me I can't do something, then I'm destined to prove you wrong, right? As long as it's something that I want to do. So that is my entire, you know, my mindset back then, which because of that mindset and because of supporting things that I had in my life, I was able to be the first student in that high school's history to earn a D1 scholarship coming out of that school. And it was Chesapeake High School down in Baltimore County, which then led to me being the first male in my family to ever earn a degree and start to change that generational cycle of poverty and just like that poor mindset that my family has had over the years. So I know that was kind of a long roundabout way, but that's kind of the story of how I got to where I am today. And obviously I didn't make it to the league because I would have mentioned that. But after coming out of college, I realized like, man, I got to start doing stuff. I got into sales basically directly out of college, which helped me a lot inside of the business that I have today, because in anything you do, you got to learn how to sell, right? Even if you're trying to find a wife, you got to learn how to sell because you got to sell yourself.
People don't realize that's the whole thought process. Everywhere. Sales is everywhere.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So that's cool. It's good to know that number one, you survived. You didn't become a statistic.
Facts.
And you talked about how, you know, you kind of had your path set on that career in sports. And, you know, I always ask people, like, had there been a moment in your life where you totally felt like defeated and felt like lost and felt stuck and didn't know how to proceed? You mentioned earlier, you know, previously in our pre-conversation that was one of those moments for you. Like, how did that feel for you? And then how did you end up finding the strength that you needed to be able to come up out of that and to redirect energy?
That's a great question, because obviously my entire life, I had this dream of going to the league, right? I would say from the time I was about maybe 12, 13 years old, all the way up until I was 22 years old. So that's, you know, 8, 9, 10 years, whatever that is. I had one set mind, like I'm going to the NFL, right? That was the only way I was going to answer the problems and things that I felt as though my family had, right? And I would say probably around junior year in college was when the reality hit me. Like, bro, you ain't going to the league, right? You don't have the stats, you don't have the playing time, you don't have anything. Like my college career was nothing that I expected it to be. So it hit me hard. I remember calling my brother and I considered transferring and trying to go somewhere else and do some different stuff. And you know, it was a I don't know, it was like that rock bottom moment when I realized like, bro, I'm gonna have to figure out something else because the game ain't gonna be there for me to play forever anymore, right? So I remember that time, and then I basically, because up until that point in time in college, I wasn't as adamant about education, put it that way, right? I wasn't adamant about going to every single class and making the best out of every single class and every single connection, things like that. Which then once that hit in as a reality, I started to become more of a networker while I was in college. I started to develop a little bit more relationships. I got closer with some of the professors and people that are there. A lot of the professors at Bryant, I'm still close to. I still chat with today, which is pretty cool. But coming out of that, it was kind of that resolve, right? So once I realized that I wasn't going to go to the league, I had to swallow that pill, and then I had to realize like, okay, what's next then? And I started going on interviews and just all kinds of different places. I think I had 10 different job offers by the time I graduated, just because I was literally bouncing around and taking any interview that would have me, right? All of them in sales, but it could have been tech sales. It was all over the place. And the job that I ended up with was in synthetic turf sales. I was chasing what I call white elephants by the time I got out of college. But yeah, it was definitely one of those moments where I had to reflect on myself, right? So I had to not feel defeated. Like I was defeated in the moment, definitely, but I had a conversation with myself and say, what next? You know, this is obviously a setback. It's not what you had planned, but what are you going to do from here to make the best out of the situation that you're in? And I think that's a huge mindset that, you know, anybody should adopt, because whatever you're going through, how bad it seems, whatever circumstances it is, it will get better. as long as you choose to make it better, right?
Yeah.
As long as you choose to not play the victim card, but instead have that mindset of, there's something that I can do to get out of this situation, and I just need to figure out the opportunity of how to, not why can't I. So that's a huge thing.
Yeah, you touched on a couple things that I think are key that people should hear and know. And it's like, one, those moments of defeat are moments. Like, they don't have to be your permanent place. You don't have to make it comfortable and let that be your home. I know emotionally it can be difficult sometimes for people to be able to find a way to come out of that, which is why I think it's so important that you keep good people around you, or you at least tap into sources of energy from people who are optimistic and who do believe that you can kind of move beyond that. But it's a moment, and everybody goes through those moments at times, sometimes multiple times. And I've, over the years, have learned how to recognize when I'm in one of those moments, but then also know what I need to do to bring myself out of that. Absolutely. And the other part of what you touched on is the fact that it is a choice. Like, at some point you decided, you know what, this ain't working, and I need to proceed and I need to move forward. And that's where it begins. You don't know the answer at that time, but you know that you got to do something different.
Right. And the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing over and over again and not getting and expecting different results, right?
Exactly.
So I feel like that's it's a mindset. So the longer you keep on just hitting your head against a wall, right? You got to figure out, bro, like, at some point you either got to go around the wall, or you got to go back and get yourself a sledgehammer or something. Stop using your head, bro. Like, you got to try something different.
Exactly. And that brings me to the title of your book. Can you tell me, like, when I think about unlock yourself, how to earn the success you were born to create? Like, that resonated with me a lot, because I'm big on identifying the fact that we have the power to create whatever we want to create.
Absolutely.
I resonate with it. But tell me about, how you came to that title and why you felt that was appropriate for this book.
Definitely. So behind the scenes of everything, I think I have a core belief that there are seeds of greatness inside of all of us. We are all meant to do great things, right? Whether you believe it about yourself or not, I believe that you were meant to do great things, right? So the whole how to create the success you were born to create, it's already there, right? It's already inside of you, but it's a seed, right? I look at everything as like a seed, because if you have the seeds that's inside of you, you got to just figure out where to plant those seeds so that you can get the best growth out of yourself, right? If you plant yourself in an environment that has a lot of negative people, they're not necessarily uplifting you and encouraging your dreams, then a lot of time that seed, it starts to shrivel, right? It doesn't actually give the opportunity for it to grow. But compared to if you plant it in an environment where you have people that's around you that's willing to communicate to you and encourage you and uplift you and praise you, then a lot of times that seed has a better opportunity to actually sprout out and be what it was supposed to be, right? So that was where, the core fundamental of it, but the framework of it, I think, is kind of a really, I guess, critical part of the book itself, because the book is called Unlock Yourself, but the formula that's inside is Unlock You. And I go through an entire formula step by step. It's just an acronym that I help people basically go from, hey, I don't know what the heck to do with my life. I don't know where I'm going or where direction that I want to head in, to let's figure that part out first. And now let's start putting all the things in place around it that's going to increase your probability of actually creating that success. Right. So I don't know about you, but I've always learned a lot better from acronyms or just stuff that's easily understandable, or easily just kind of filtered into the brain. So I felt the acronym was the perfect thing to go with. And then it just fit, right? Because you go from this process of like identifying what I call an upshot, which is basically your vision, where you want to go, the path that you have laid out, where you want to actually end up, to a spot where you now understand that it's an unending process, right? Because as you hit a new goal, as you get to the point where you feel as though like, man, this is what I wanted my entire life, I've hit this. Well, now you got to set a new goal, because as soon as you get content, you start falling backwards, right? So it's that mindset of adopting, like, I have to continuously be learning, because there's no such thing as standing still. You're either moving forward or you're moving backwards by default, right? So that's the whole thought process behind it. Hopefully it helps somebody.
Sure will. I like that. You said if you're standing still, you're moving backwards by default. That's I never thought about it that way. That's a good way to think about it. I
I
know
look at
people.
life as an escalator, man. Going up and down escalator.
That's a good one. I know people are gonna be mad at me if I don't ask you what the acronym is.
That's true. So it's unlock you, right? So the U is for upshot, which is your vision. I talk about what's the best that can happen. The N is for negativity. So I tell people you have to learn how to cap the negative if you want to be successful in anything that you want to do. The L is for listening. So that's basically the opposite of negativity. You want to listen to people that encourage you and tell you that you can accomplish something. The O is for optimize, which is basically your association. So I call it optimizing your growth environment. So the people that you hang out with, the people that you're around, the fundamental belief of if you're trying to be a business owner, you can't spend the majority of your time with employees, right? They don't think the same. You're going to have to get around people who are thinking like you, or at least further along than you in their thought process, so that you can grow into it, right? So that's the optimized portion of it. The C is choices, because life is all about choices. I think I go in on that chapter more than any other chapter, because it's very, very important to create trust with people that you're around, to create trust within yourself. You have to start making those choices every single day, because success is literally just good choices compounded over time. That's all it is, right?
Yeah.
The K is knowledge. So basically saying applied knowledge is power, not just knowledge alone, because I hate that phrase. People always say knowledge is power.
Yeah.
It's applied, right? Because you can walk around being the encyclopedia, just Wikipedia everything and have everything just spur out of you. But until you start to apply what you have inside of your mind, there's nothing that you can create from it, right? So that whole chapter is about knowledge and how you acquire it and why it's important to acquire it, but importantly, why you should apply it instead of just holding on to it, right? So that's the unlock portion. Then when you go into U, the Y in U stands for yearn, which is, I don't know about you, but I'm a big faith guy, right? So a yearn is not something that you hear all the time, but for me, it was something that I saw in the Bible all the time. And it's basically having this deep burning desire to accomplish your dreams, your goals, because that's what you're going to need to have when you go through and have this big idea of what you want to accomplish, because you're going to have so many people that tell you it can't be done. You're going to have people that's going to be trying to be a crab in a bucket, right? Pulling you back down because you can't. They don't want you to succeed because it only reveals to them how sucky their life actually is, right? So you got to have this. Exactly, right? They don't intentionally do it, but they do it because it's typically a lot of what they think of you is only a reflection of what they think of themselves.
Yeah.
And what they can accomplish. So you can't accept some people's expectation of you. So you got to have that yearning, that burning desire to just overcome all the obstacles and things that's going to come in front of you, because you will get obstacles. But it's good news, because that means you're going in the right direction, right? The O of the second O of that acronym is observe. I've always been an observant guy. Always been a guy that I want to look at an example, either good or bad, and learn from it. A lot of what I did inside of my life, the success I had up until I was about 22 years old, was literally because I did the exact opposite of all the male figures in my life, period, right? My dad was on drugs as well as drink alcohol and abuse my mom. I did the exact opposite. I was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing any of those things. But I never had like a compass. I call it running away from something, right? I was running away from something until I was 22. Then I started running towards something, which is purpose. It was impact. It was legacy, right? So observing is huge, because you learn from the bad examples that you have inside of your life, but you also learn from the good examples, right? The people that are actually there and can teach you some things. And I got mentors in my life today, man, who these men are men of character. And I wouldn't, it's like big brothers that you never had or dads that you never had. And you're just like, man, I'm so thankful that I'm connected to a group of men who are men, right? They're not men or boys trying to play men, right? But they're actually men and stand there for their family. They're great examples of husbands. They're great examples of business owners. Have great examples of dads. And that just wasn't something that I was born into or had around me when I was growing up, right? And then the very last one is what we already mentioned, but it's unending. You have to understand that this entire process is unending. Your personal growth journey is unending. You're never going to get to a point where you arrive. You're not going to hit a dollar figure and be like, oh, I made it. This is it. I'm done, right? You're always, at least for me, you're always going to have that mindset of what's next, right? How can I serve more? How can I give more? How can I teach what I know? Because for me, it's all about legacy, right? So whoever's coming up behind me, it's I want you to know, and I want you to have these tools and everything that I didn't have, so that you can go out and create a life that you're passionate about living.